Welcome everyone to this teaching presentation on Bloom's Taxonomy of learning domains. It's one of the theories that have a great application in education. So please listen carefully, do the exercises, and have a nice time learning. The learning objectives that I have set for you, here I have applied Bloom's Taxonomy. You can actually see that. At the end of this session, you will be able to recapitulate the domains of learning and list them. You'll be able to identify a few action verbs for each of the domains and for each of the levels of learning domain, all the three learning domains. All three learning domains have different levels, so there are action verbs for different levels. So you will be able to practice writing learning objectives using those learning domains. And you will be able to discuss what is the practical advantage or uses of this particular model in education. So Bloom's taxonomy, what is it? It's a hierarchical framework developed by Benjamin Bloom and his team in 1956. It categorizes the learning educational goals into 6 cognitive levels in the cognitive domain. So also in the revision in 2001, they have identified the levels of learning in the psychomotor and affective domain as well, and have found the levels of learning and identified certain action verbs or words that can be used to write learning objectives. So these levels range from lower to higher order of learning behavior. So educators use this for structuring teaching programs. They also use it for writing the learning objectives. It can be used for designing a curriculum based on the hierarchy of learning that is expected to happen in the learners. So these are the applications of the Bloom's taxonomy. Because these are the levels that you use for writing learning objectives, you can use the same principle to assess their mastery in learning also. So what are the domains? You already heard me say the cognitive domain, which represents the knowledge and thinking in a person. The affective domain representing the emotion and the feeling and attitudes and values of a person. And the psychomotor domain represents the skills of using the body appropriately. The cognitive domain is described using the fact that the cognition is a very specific brain action. It constitutes the human intelligence, memory, and perception. This domain involves knowledge acquisition, knowledge storing, knowledge recapitulation, and critical thinking. So this is the most focused domain in most of the educational programs, especially in the conventional educational programs. There are 6 levels to this learning hierarchy. We'll see what are the 6 levels now. This is a pyramid showing the levels of cognitive domain from low to high. So the first one you can see is about the skill to remember. Second is about understanding. Third is about applying. Fourth is analyzing. Fifth is evaluating. And sixth is creativity. So when we plan teaching, we have to plan to develop the learning in these levels in a hierarchical model, which is easier for the student and it's easier for us to assess as well. This slide is showing you a list of action verbs or words that can be used for the different levels of the cognitive domain. So some of the important words are like define, identify, etc. for whether the child or the student can learn or remember. And for understanding, you use the word summarize, reiterate, extract, etc. So like that, for application, solve, change, represent, applying the learning to a process of solving. Analysis is possible, is demonstrable through comparing and contrasting, etc. So you look at all the words. I'm just giving a few examples. You take time, stop your slide presentation here and watch all these words. These are some examples for how to write a learning objective for each of the levels of the cognitive process. So remember can be written by saying the student will be able to name something. Similarly, understanding can be expressed by expecting the students to group some list that is given to them, something like that. So here I have used ego state. And application is doing something. So drawing a caricature of the ego states, showing postures will be an application objective. Like that, for analysis, compare and contrast. For evaluation, defend a concept that has been learned. And creation, maybe plan and write objectives for a project. So these are all some of the objectives that can be set. Now you can go back and look at the learning objectives I have set for you. They are also a model for how Bloom's taxonomy can be used in setting learning objectives. So now it's time for a practical exercise. Ideally, you should be doing it in groups of 2, but if you are seeing the video by yourself, you can do it by yourself also. But if you can get a friend and see the video together, who also is in teaching, and do this exercise, it will be nice. Develop learning objectives for a teaching session using the levels of the cognitive domains that you intend to teach for, and also the action verbs that you can choose from the list given to you. So what is the affective domain about? It's about the emotions, the feelings, the attitudes and the values that a student learn from his educational program. So how do we level it? Receiving, responding, organizing, valuing, characterizing are all different levels of the affective domains development. And now let's look at what are the words that typically. These are the different action verbs identified for the different levels of the affective domain. Adhere, appreciate, choose, demonstrate, defend. So let's see some examples also for each of these words. We are going on to, after you see all these words, we'll see all the examples. So examples for receiving is, at the end of a session, the student will listen respectfully to the different perspectives on a topic. Maybe the student will be able to share personal experiences related to the learning that happened in the group. So you can see the word for responding is being able to share. And valuing is the student will demonstrate faith in the democratic process. So that will reflect the student valuing the democratic process. For organizing, the example given is willingly. So the student will be able to willingly adhere to some of the guidelines that is given or the ground rules. Characterization would be like the student will be able to display the commitment to the ethical ideas or principles that they have been taught. So you can see how the levels of the domain learning, the learning in the domain increases, and how you can use words for that. Now looking at the psychomotor domain, this domain involves manual or physical skills where the body has to be used appropriately. So it's a skill to use the body. And the levels of learning in this domain are like observation, practice, imitate, adapt, and mastery of physical skills. So let's see what are the words that can be used to develop learning objectives for this domain. So here we'll see what are some of the words we can use to write learning objectives for the psychomotor domain. Words like assemble, calibrate, demonstrate, dismantle, fasten, modify, all these words, you need to use the body to do that. So we can also see some examples for the same. So now let's see what are the learning objectives that you can write for the psychomotor domain. Observation, limitation, practice, adaptation, and mastery. So these are the words that I have used to write these skills. The student will be able to observe the teacher. So the methodology would be like the teacher has to demonstrate it. And the student learns by imitating. So the student will be able to perform exactly what the teacher demonstrated. And the practice would be, an example I'm giving here is stroking. So if the teacher used a methodology of practicing stroking in the teaching session, the students will be able to practice it in future also, genuinely. The mastery can be demonstrated by, will be able to reflect and articulate their experience when they worked with a client or something like that. So practice counseling in the teaching would be a methodology that is used. So you can see how the setting the learning objectives directs you to choose your methodology of teaching. Again, I'm inviting you to do this exercise in groups of 2. Please stop the video, and if you're seeing this video by yourself, identify a learner with you who is a teacher trainee or a teacher herself, and sit and try to do this exercise. Thank you. I hope you have learned the Bloom's taxonomy and its principles and gained some skills to practice it in your teaching practice.